Thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to just share my slides here. Today, I'm pleased to join today's conference and provide an opening talk and an update, 2021 update on compounding policy and oversight. My name is Gabrielle Cosel, and as mentioned, I'm Director of Division of Compounding Policy and Outreach in the Office of Compounding Quality and Compliance. So today I'd like to cover some updates in three buckets. One is to discuss a bit policy activities and oversight activities on compounding during COVID-19 the past year. Then I'd like to provide some additional policy updates related to compounding. And finally, I'll talk about our outreach activity, including our work under our relatively new initiative, the Compounding Quality Center of Excellence. Just to level set, FDA advances policy on drug compounding, we really seek to balance a number of goals. First and foremost, we seek to protect the public health. We're also clarity to stakeholders, though, and decrease regulatory where possible. We get a lot of questions and comments from stakeholders, which are really significant inputs that inform our policy development process, and we welcome that. We also provide clarity where we can about the roles of FDA and the states, which for compounding is a very important topic. And finally, we want to back access to compounded drugs with supporting primary approved drugs whenever possible. Building on that last point, when we develop our policy, we seek to consider compounded drugs, but also necessity. And then if approved drugs meet patients' medical needs, we really want our policies to support their primary use. Of course, when patients use compounded drugs, we want to make sure that appropriate quality standards are in place to ensure their quality. So let me discuss now of FDA's policies and oversight activities during the pandemic. About a year ago now, we at FDA, and I think people in the room were busy work to try to understand and address the impacts of the COVID-19 public emergency on our medical products supply. We tried to act fairly quickly where we thought we could have an impact by issuing a number of temporary guidances to help address supply disruptions that we were seeing that put patients at risk. And these guidances include a pair of guidances addressing compounding during the pandemic by outsourcing facilities and other compounders, guidance on compounding of hand sanitizers and related guidances for other entities making hand sanitizers, guidance on compounding when standard PPE is not available, guidance on repackaging of propofol, and reporting during the pandemic, which does cover outsourcing facilities as well for increased production of compounded drugs to address supply disruptions. So I'll begin by talking about our two guidances on compounding during the pandemic, really aimed at mitigating some of the supply disruptions we saw for certain therapies needed for COVID-19 patients. In general, just as a backdrop, FDA tries to address drug shortages by restoring supplies of FDA-approved drugs first. But of course, compounded drugs can be a really important source of drugs during shortage as well. And in light of the exigencies posed by COVID-19, we determined it would be for us to provide some additional flexibilities so that compounders were better able to meet these needs when FDA-approved products weren't available. When we put these two guidances together for outsourcing facilities as well as compounders under 503A, we try to draft them so they would prioritize sourcing of approved drugs when possible, and if not, then prioritize sourcing of drugs from sourcing facilities first before turning to other compounders. So I'll just provide a quick overview of these two. Our temporary guidance for outsourcing facilities provides flexibility on statutory provisions on essentially a copy, including a 90-day period after a product is removed from the list of products that's referenced in the guidance to provide some market certainty for entities wishing to produce those products. There's flexibility on the use of bulk drug substances to compound drugs that are not on FDA's drug shortage list. So some of the products on the list referenced the guidance are not currently on the shortage list. This flexibility does not address provisions related to conformance with USP standards, sourcing from registered suppliers, and the like, those still apply. And there's flexibility on CGMP expectations related to stability studies and expiration dates, which I'll discuss a little bit more in a minute. So the guidance has a number of conditions. It applies to drugs that are on the list referenced in the guidance that we maintain on our website, and the drug contains only one active ingredient. I'll show the list in a minute, but basically single ingredient aqueous solutions, a set of them. It applies for compounded drugs that are provided directly to a hospital that has tried and been unable to get adequate supplies of FDA-approved drug products with the same active for the same route. It also expects weekly reporting for drug products compounded under the guidance. The weekly reports include the information that are typically reported in the biannual report that outsourcing facilities provide to FDA, that the OFs provide the cumulative number of individual units of the drug product produced during the current reporting period iteratively as the weeks go on. So as I mentioned, there are some expectations related to stability testing and expiration dates. Basically, the products produced under the guidance have to meet the conditions described in an Appendix A of that guidance, which provides some pathways for stability testing. That if the compounded drug is an aqueous sterile solution for injection and all ingredients are relatively soluble, there's some default BUD that may be used that are slightly longer. And when limited stability testing is initiated once the aggregate batch size is expected to exceed 1,000 units. And finally, that container closure system is used for previous experience and data. Products currently referenced in the guidance. It has stayed relatively stable in the past several months. The last change was that epinephrine was removed in October of last year. And these are the products that to date have been produced by outsourcing facilities under the guidance. I'll now just talk briefly about our counterprovisions for compounding pharmacies that are not outsourcing facilities. This offers temporary flexibility related to the essentially a copy provision, as well as the prescription requirement in Section 503A. Again, the policy applies to the drugs that are on the list referenced in the guidance. And here, the expectation is that the hospital is unable to obtain FDA-approved drugs or drugs from outsourcing facilities before turning to drugs funded by Section 503A. There's also an expectation that the pharmacy compounding under the guidance notifies their state board of pharmacy, and the board says that they don't object to the activity. I think this connection with the State Board of Pharmacy is really important, as states are the primary entity overseeing compounding pharmacies, state licensed compounding pharmacies. There's an expectation that the order be marked with the hot name of the hospital and COVID-19, and that patients receiving the drugs, the list of the patients that receive the drugs be sent back to the compounder within a month. There's limited beyond use dates as well, and an expectation to report adverse events. I'll move on now to our policy on compounding of alcohol-based hand sanitizers during the pandemic. The guidance describes a number of conditions, including production according to a specific formula, and that additional ingredients are not added. For example, ingredients to improve smell or taste due to the risk of accidental ingestion. And there's a number of circumstances in the guidance that you can see if you refer to the guidance. As you may know, last summer there was an increase in hand sanitizer products that are labeled to contain ethanol, but that actually tested positive for methanol contamination. And in addition, there were state reports of adverse events from adults and children that were ingesting these products contaminated with methanol, and including blindness, hospitalizations, and death. So these were very serious events, and in response, we updated our hand sanitizer guidance in August to address testing for methanol. And under the revised guidance, any alcohol or isopropyl alcohol containing more than 630 parts per million methanol is not consistent with the temporary policy, so would not be permitted. Compounders can use a laboratory to test supplies of alcohol or isopropyl alcohol for methanol content, but FDA strongly recommends a lab that's been inspected by FDA and in compliance with CGMP. In addition, some other updates. Since that time, the United States Pharmaceutical Convention has revised their their monograph for alcohol, dehydrated alcohol, to include a limit for methanol test in the ID section. And finally, in January of this year, FDA also issued a guidance on testing of alcohol and isopropyl alcohol for methanol, which can be seen at that link. So, compounding has played a very important role in the delivery of care to patients during the pandemic. But FDA has also sought to alert compounders and providers to potential risks where we see them. And to that end, earlier this year, we communicated concerns about the potential compounding of remdesivir and thymosin for use in patients with COVID-19. For thymosin, the agency became aware of drug products containing thymosin being offered to patients for COVID-19, but thymosin is not approved to treat any condition, including COVID-19. And we clarified that thymosin does not meet the conditions for compounding under sections 503A and 503B. On remdesivir, FDA published a compounding risk alert in February describing complexities that may make this drug particularly challenging to compound. The agency is concerned that if it were to be compounded, patients receive substandard or low-quality compounded remdesivir products, which could result in patient harm. So turning to Oversight, as folks know, FDA inspections were temporarily suspended at the beginning of the pandemic, and they resumed last summer in a limited fashion under a new risk-based assessment system. Of course, as everyone knows, we are not yet back to normal on inspections due to the continued challenges imposed by the pandemic. But we are, working diligently to do as much as we can in this space, and we hope things will improve soon. However, in the meantime, while inspections are limited, we're exploring other ways to provide oversight and engage in these important conversations with the industry. So we've started a new initiative we call remote regulatory assessments to allow FDA and outsourcing facilities to continue dialogue and collaboration when we, aren't conducting our inspections in the same way. And these assessments are based on records review and are conducted under FDA's authority under Section 704 and 503B. Some examples of records that FDA might request are shown here, facility design diagrams, adverse event reports, product labels, etc. We've just begun to pursue this and hope it's going to be a useful one. All right, now to provide some updates on policy matters that aren't directly related to the pandemic, starting with the FDA State Memorandum of Understanding, updates on our bulks list development efforts, and on insanitary conditions. So the final standard MOU, this was a major milestone for us. We published the final standard memorandum of understanding interstate distribution of compounded drugs in October of last year. And of course, a condition of Section 503A is that a compounded drug may be eligible for the exemptions under that section only if it's made in a state that has entered into an MOU with FDA that addresses distribution of inordinate amounts of compounded drugs and provides for investigation of complaints related to those products. Or if the state has not entered into the MOU, there's a limit on distribution of compounded drugs outside of the state to 5% of total prescription orders by the pharmacy. So this finalization of this standard MOU has been a long time coming, and we had a lot of we had a number of versions of this previously, and we've had a lot of comments from the states, although those have gotten smaller and smaller over time. And we're also worked closely with the NABP on development. In this version of the MOU, we really tried to address any remaining concerns raised by the states about the document, including sources concerns, signature authority concerns, and questions about authority over physician compounding. Just a slide on to remind folks why FDA views this as a very important piece of implementation. As folks know, compounders under Section 503 are mainly overseen by their home state regulator. And Congress did not intend for compounders operating under Section 503 to grow into conventional manufacturing operations, conducting a substantial portion of their business interstate without adequate oversight. If this happens, if large portions of a compounder's drug go outside of state borders, adequate regulation of these drugs can really pose logistical, regulatory, and financial challenges to state regulators. It can be very difficult to investigate and address multi-state outbreaks, to follow up on complaints, et cetera. So you can envision a scenario where a poor-performing pharma located in the state with insufficient resources to engage in routine oversight, and this would put patients in other states at risk. So the MOU, in place provides a sort of better approach to coordinate information sharing and inform oversight, both coordinate between states and with states and the FDA. So on the MOU, our next steps, we're currently in a one-year grace period that we've said we would deploy before we would enforce the 5% statutory limit on interstate distribution for compounders located in that have not signed the MOU. States can sign the MOU at any time, but this grace period is just for states to, consider and provide some time to make decisions before the enforcement of 5% begins. As folks may know, NMEP are also making available an information sharing network for interested to use to, in part, complete the information collections associated with the MOU. So, as I mentioned, state resource concerns was one comment we had when we were developing the MOU, and we heard that, and so what we did is, through a grant to NAVP, have had them develop an information sharing system that states may use to get information from pharmacies about the products they distribute across state lines, and use that to report to FDA as required under the MOU entities that cross that 50% threshold that the final standard MOU describes, which is a threshold for information reporting and not a limit on interstate distribution. An update on progress on the 503B bulks list. Of course, as you know, it's a condition of 503B that an outsourcing facility doesn't compound using bulk drug substances unless it appears on a list established by the Secretary identifying substances for which there is a clinical need or it's in shortage. And FDA has published proposals to include or not include bulk substances on the 503B bulks list in the Federal Register. In August, so this is just a bit of a recap on prior FRNs. We issued one in August 2018 where we proposed to not include 3 substances. In March 2019, we similarly proposed for 2 substances that we did not find a clinical need for inclusion in the list. In September 2019, we proposed to not include 9 bulk substances, and in July of 2020, we proposed adding 4 bulk drug substances to the bulks list, and these include diphenylcyclopropanone, you'll have to forgive me if I mispronounce some of these, glycolic acid, squaric acid dibutylester, and trichloroacetic acid. Additionally, we proposed 19 bulk drug substances not be included on the list. And then, as some may have seen, actually, we just yesterday/today announced the publication of a new Federal Register notice that identifies 1 bulk quinaquine hydrochloride that we are proposing on the 503B list, as well as 4 bulk drug substances that we are proposing not to include on the list, and those are bromphenic sodium, mitomycin C, nipafenac, and hydroxychloroquine sulfate. Regarding quinaquine, the agency nominated quinaquine hydrochloride to compound oral products for the treatment of cutaneous lupus. This is a summary of the bulk drug substances evaluated to date, and it shows our proposed and final determinations as described in the register notice published between 2018 and today. So we've looked at a total of 40 bulk drug substances now, and to date we've proposed to include 5 and proposed to not include 35 with a final determination for 2 of those, nicardipine hydrochloride and vasopressin. On the 503A bulk list, we're continuing our work here as well, and the law directs us to make, which we are directed to do via the statutory provision described here. As a reminder, under 503A, compounders can automatically compound with a bulk substance that's a component of an FDA-approved drug or that's subject of an applicable USP monograph. And if neither of those are the case, then they may also compound if the drug is on a list that we create through regulation, which we call the 503A bulks list. So this is a recap of prior actions here. We had a rulemaking in February 2019 where we codified criteria used to evaluate substances nominated for inclusion on the list and added 6 substances and did not add 4. We did a proposed rule in September 2019 where we proposed 5 substances for the list and proposed 26 substances not be added. Excuse me. And I think that's our latest update on the work on the list. But the work on the 503A list is also ongoing as well. And then on insanitary conditions, this past November, FDA also published a final guidance on sanitary conditions at compounding facilities. And it included a few clarifications, related to the processing of beta-lactams, the physician in-office compounding and administration. On that point, what the clarification says is that FDA generally does not intend to take action under Section 501A2A, regarding preparation under insanitary conditions against a physician who's compounding a drug product, repackaging an approved drug product, or mixing, diluting, repackaging a licensed biological product, provided that it occurs in the physician's office for in-office administration to the physician's patients. We also included in the final guidance recommendations encouraging compounders to use risk evaluation strategies and risk management tools to put in place appropriate controls to prevent the occurrence of insanitary conditions at their facilities. Finally, last year we put on our website a number of policy clarifications, including 2 relevant to guidance on hospital and health system compounding and guidance on the copies provisions under sections 503 and 503B. So on hospital and health systems compounding, we said that the agency's draft guidance, which includes what folks may, often refer to as the 1 mile radius provision, is still in draft, and we're planning to issue a revision. The draft guidance was issued for public comment and hasn't been implemented. So the 1 mile radius relates to a proposed enforcement policy that would provide the hospital to conduct non-patient specific distribution of compounded drugs within the health system. So we're looking at these policies still as the long and short of this policy clarification, and that draft guidance has not been implemented. So essentially the copy guidance is, we said the agency, a couple clarifications here. First, we said the agency does not consider drugs that are on FDA shortage list that have been continued and are no longer marketed to be commercially available, actually a copy provision for pharmacy and physician compound regulated under Section 503A. So we were getting questions on this. I wanted to make sure it was clear. We wanted to clarify that the agency does not consider a compounded drug produced by an outsourcing facility to be essentially a copy if it's identical or nearly identical to an FDA-approved drug, the drug shortage list. And similarly, for drugs that have been discontinued and are no, FDA would not take action in that case. We also received questions and comments on our policies for applying the essentially a copy provision when outsourcing facilities compound drugs starting with an approved drug rather than a bulk drug substance. And we're looking at this, address these comments in an upcoming revision to the guidance. All right, I'll in my final section here, I want to talk about some of our outreach activities and engagement activities. Stakeholder engagement is a hugely important part of our overall program. We need stakeholder input to do our work. It's critical. We welcome stakeholder views on our policies and oversight activities. We want to understand, firsthand impact on public health. We want to understand implications for current practice. So we have and are continuing to try to make sure we have good channels in place to get this feedback and get this communication. We hold annual stakeholder listening sessions and other related meetings. We have intergovernmental meetings with state and federal partners. We solicit comments on our policy proposals. We really welcome comments on those. And we welcome questions and requests for guidance on ways to comply with statutory requirements. I mentioned this is really, we really rely on this to help inform our policy development process. This is a snapshot of some of the activities I'll talk about. I want to talk about our compounding excellence, our annual listening sessions, and some additional listening sessions we're rolling out this year, and then our engagement with the state boards of pharmacy. So our Compounding Quality Center of Excellence is a large new initiative that was launched in 2019, and we're very excited about this initiative. Its overall goal is to really sort of shift our approach to a more engagement focused approach, and with the goal of improving and strengthening the quality of compounded drugs, primarily those made at outsourcing facilities. The flagship piece of this effort, as folks may know, is a large amount of training on current good manufacturing practice for outsourcing facilities and entities that wish to become outsourced to help elevate sector performance and improve product quality. These trainings also address other regulatory requirements as well. We've got both instructor-led training and self-guided web-based training, which I'll cover on the next slide. The other prongs of the Center of Excellence include research. We've been conducting market analyses to help sort of describe and get our hands around the current and future market and sector for outsourcing facilities, including potential market barriers. And we also are running an annual conference to bring together outsourcing facilities and other stakeholders in the ecosystem, and of course the agency to talk about key issues and best practices. And, stay tuned for more to come on this year's conference, which will be sometime in September of 2021. So just really wanted to highlight the current training offerings that are available now. I highly encourage anyone who's interested to reach out and seek to register. Again, our target audience are the outsourcing facilities, but if there are other compounders who are considering joining the sector and would like to benefit from this free learning, we strongly encourage you to try to sign up for courses. We have, so our instructor-led training, you can see courses here. We've got 4 GMP courses: environmental monitoring, stale drug compounding, investigations in CAPA, and clean room. These began as actual in-person lab-based instruction. And we hope very much that we'll be able to get back to that model, once the pandemic permits it, which is obviously the best way to learn some of these topics is to be in the lab. Since we can't do that right now, we are holding these courses virtually. We're still getting interest, folks signing up. So again, these are really great opportunities and recommend you take advantage. They're about 8 courses each with instructor-led learning all 4 days. We have self-guided web-based courses as well. They're also available now. These you can access them through our website. You can take them anytime. Anyone can take them, available freely to the public. And you can see the topics here that are covered. The first 2 provide, I think, a very useful broad overview of the regulatory framework for drug compounding, as well as information specifically for outsourcing facilities in terms of the requirements that apply to them. You can get CE for these trainings, both kinds. And we're also working on new courses this year, and we'll hopefully be rolling some of those out in the coming months. And our link here is below. You can navigate to all of the course availability through our Center of Excellence link here. This is just a little snapshot of statistics for our effort. We've been really proud about our ability to engage in this space. About 3/4 or almost 3/4 of outsourcing facilities have taken our trainings, 32 instances in total, and we've had close to 300 folks claiming credits for all the courses as well. So we think and hope this is a useful resource, and we encourage folks to take advantage of it. A few more words on the research getting conducted under the Center of Excellence effort as well. We last year and again this year are engaging in work to better understand barriers and opportunities encountered by outsourcing facilities, generally in 3 major areas: looking at the marketplace and business viability, looking at high-quality drug production / compliance with federal compounding laws and related regulations, and then also looking at FDA and outsourcing facility interactions. The methodology here includes, in addition to certain data analyses, discussions with outsourcing facility management and staff, as well as a survey sent to all registered outsourcing facilities. And the discussions in the survey we know are conducted through a third-party contractor that we've hired Deloitte, so that all feedback can remain anonymous. So this is an appeal to participating in those outsourcing facilities on the phone today. We really would value your input through these mechanisms. Here's a look at some additional outreach activities. We will be holding our stakeholder listening sessions on drug compounding in June again. These are our tentative dates. Save the dates have gone out to the outsourced facilities and should be going out to other organizations shortly. We are also rolling out an initiative to engage in small group listening sessions with outsourcing facilities this year to try to get better penetration into the sector, to hear our voices, and to have conversations in a small group format to help dive into some issues that are relevant to the sector. We do a lot of work with state boards of pharmacy and with NABP. We are holding a series of listening sessions with state boards of pharmacy on the MOU. Those will be held sometime in April. We have an annual meeting with the 50 plus state boards of pharmacy in October. We will be doing that again this year, where we discuss issues related to oversight coordination, and we also really hear from outsourcing facilities and others about their views on state oversight and questions about potential discrepancies or the like. We take these issues that we hear from facilities during the listening sessions and we bring them to both NABP and the states when we engage with them. So we try to make that feedback loop happen as best we can. We meet with NABP monthly, more than monthly really, but we have at least monthly we meet with them to discuss issues. And we have direct engagement ad hoc with individual state boards of pharmacy as needed on specific topics. And that concludes my talk. And I believe, let's see, there might be a few minutes for questions, and I'm happy to take any that folks may have. I'll close my slide.
All right, Gaby, thank you very much. Okay, everybody, hang on. We'll get Gaby back.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I accidentally left the room. Can folks see and hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. I was just about to go looking for you.
Sorry, okay. I pressed escape to exit slide and it took me out.
Great. I don't know if you can see the questions. There was also one regarding when does the MOU enforcement grace period end?
Yeah, I believe offhand it's October 27th of this year, but let me I can check and confirm that date for you. And I'm seeing a question regarding the term pharmaceutical grade. I would just point you to our final guidance on sanitary conditions. It's the best for just our general thinking about, the questions about ingredient quality. And I would also, you to, I think, some policy on bulks, and I'm trying to remember which one it is, but basically we explain as well, our thinking behind the term applicable monograph and why we consider applicable monograph to mean a drug monograph versus a dietary monograph.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions?
There's a question about MOU adoption by the states. So we've been encouraged by a good amount of dialogue and engagement from the states, questions, and desire to talk with us about elements of the MOU, and procedures and protocols. So I am, and as I mentioned, we're going to be having some small group sessions with to discuss as well. I think there's a lot of interest and engagement. I know that others have been sort of polling states on this, but we don't have a final signature in hand yet for an MOU. I think we're really encouraged by the amount of interest we're seeing on the state side.
Okay. Anybody else? All righty then.